Hi Hunter, it's your brother Shenechy, Mackay of Carrickbraith here in Sicily this time. And this time I'm at the Agira Canadian War Cemetery, which is a Commonwealth grave in Sicily, near the town of Agira, and where there's about almost 500 Canadian soldiers, sailors and airmen who died here during the course of liberating Sicily in the Second World War. I realized the last video I sent you from Crete also dealt with warfare and the siege of Candia, and it made me realize that sadly a lot of our clan history is related to conflicts and warfare, but that is a part, I suppose, of the nature of Highland clans. And there are a number of soldiers, fallen soldiers here who belonged to Canadian Highland regiments. But specifically there are also two Mackays here, Hunter, which I'll hopefully be able to give you a bit of their stories as to how they ended up here so far from home. Hunter, I'm at the grave here of Lee Mackay, who died here in Sicily at the age of 17 after suffering from polio. He was one of four Mackay brothers, who all enlisted and fought in the Second World War, who came from Prince Edward Island, Canada's smallest province. Some years ago, his older brother, Ken Mackay, who survived the war, came to visit his brother's grave. Ken found out about his brother's death while he was in England during the war. And he had a sad memory, a happy and sad memory of his youngest brother. When he visited here, he recalled that his young brother Lee, when all the brothers were playing together in PEI, he would always be trailing behind and always calling out, "Wait for me, wait for me." And when Ken, his older brother, visited Lee's grave here, he was convinced he heard his poor young brother call out after him here at the cemetery, "Wait for me." And so understandably that was a tough moment for Ken. And there's another grave here of a Mackay, Hunter Eugene Mackay, who was older when he died, and he was killed in action on the 22nd of July 1943. But I'll tell you more about his story in a moment. So Hunter, I'm now a little farther down the road from where I was at the Commonwealth Cemetery for the Canadians, where the two Mackays were buried there. I'm outside of the town of Leonforte here in Sicily, and this is where another Canadian action took place, where Eugene Mackay, Lance Corporal Eugene Mackay of the PPCLI, that's the famous Canadian regiment, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, it's where he was killed on the 23rd of July 1943. So it was in the circumstances of after the Allied landing on Sicily, of Americans, British and Canadians had started to work their way north through Sicily, and the Germans were holding strong defensive positions along a ridge here, particularly at Asoro and here at Leonforte. So General Montgomery of the British 8th Army, he tasked the Canadian 1st Division with clearing the Germans out of Asoro and here. It was the Loyal Edmonton Regiment who first moved in here to get the Germans out. There was a long bridge crossing this ravine that the Germans had blown in order to prevent the Canadians to get in. However, they were still able on the 22nd of July to navigate this ravine and make their attack and get into Leonforte. The Germans made a heavy counterattack, such that by the end of the day on the 22nd, the 2nd Brigade of the Canadians decided that the Loyal Edmonton Regiment must have been lost. However, the commander, Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson, was able to give a message to an Italian boy local boy who actually, under the cover of night, was able to make it out of Leonforte, and he found the Canadians outside of the village and was able to pass on this note saying, "We're still alive, the loyal Edmonton Regiment are still here, so please come and get us," essentially. So the next day, the 23rd of July, Canadian engineers were able to erect a temporary bridge crossing this ravine, and the PPCLI, with tank support, was able to get into the village of Leonforte and start to attack the Germans that had moved back in the day before. So as often the case with this type of environment, there was vicious house-to-house fighting, and based on the dates, it's my expectation that Eugene Mackay, Lance Corporal Eugene Mackay, was killed during the fighting here at Leonforte. So it's sad circumstances for both those Mackays, Hunter. Perhaps we can end this episode with a recording of Flowers of the Forest, which is the traditional tune played for all Scottish dead. Thanks, Hunter. Thanks, Hunter, for including that rendition of Flowers of the Forest. There's just a couple of quick postscripts to the account. Arguably, one of the reasons for the Allies coming to Sicily in 1943 was to liberate the island from fascism, and curiously, and it perhaps makes the deaths of those who were killed during that liberation all the more tragic. But curiously, it appears that there is still in existence a fascist party here in Italy, and with members of that party serving in elected